The Bite of the Mango, Chapter 21. It was late spring 2005, and I was seated in the library of G.L. Roberts Collegiate and Vocational Institute. I was hiding my shaking knees under a big round table, afraid to look up into the eyes of the journalists who were waiting to talk with me. In a few minutes, in the auditorium down the hall, the famous Canadian rock band Sum 41 would take the stage, along with some lesser-known bands, in a benefit concert to benefit, well, me. The students at my high school, working with the students at G.L. Roberts, had organized the event. Katie, as always, was beside me. "I'm scared," I whispered to her as the first journalist approached. "Don't be," Katie whispered back. "You've talked to the media 1,000 times before. You're an old pro." I had met with journalists many times, that was true, but I was more nervous this time than ever before, and for a good reason. This would be my first interviews in which I answered the questions myself, in English, without a translator telling most of my story. My mind had run through all the possible answers I could give to the questions I thought would be coming, and none of those answers felt right to me. Every so often, a student at my school had mentioned reading a newspaper article about me. I never read any of the articles myself, so I would just nod and thank them for their interest. Then one of these students suggested to our world issues teacher that we discuss the articles in class. The teacher checked it out with me, and I said yes. As the teacher read the first article out loud, I wanted to melt in my seat. After she read a second one, I wanted to run right out of the room. When she had finished reading the articles, the teacher asked if I wanted to share anything else about my life experience with my fellow students. A knot formed in my throat. "No," I croaked. The students clapped, the bell rang, class was over. I dashed out the room, even though several of my friends were waiting to talk to me, and ran straight to the washroom where I was sick to my stomach. Some of my classmates had followed me. They thought I was upset because I was reliving the bad things that had happened to me. Our girl pulled out her cell phone and was about to call one of my nieces when I managed to say, "I'm okay. I just want to be alone for a while." I was traumatized that day because I learned for the first time that much of the information written in those articles was wrong. The most glaring mistake the journalists had made was stating that the rebels had raped me. After my confession to bomb in London, I never spoke of Salier's assault on me again. Like many people who experience violence, I wrongly believed I had brought it on myself. I would say to myself, if only I had left the house that day Salier came. If only I'd agreed to be his wife. He would have touched me until we were married. I never wanted to utter Salier's name again, let alone have to think about him, so I had shut him out of my head. That day in school, I realized that a big lie had formed because of my silence, and now I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to correct the mistake while I had the chance. Another part of me felt it would be easier to say nothing. I swallowed hard as a reporter from the Toronto Star sat down opposite me. "Hello," the woman began. "Are you excited about the concert?" "Yes," I replied. "You must be pleased to know that your dream of prosthetic hands will soon be a reality," she asked. "Yes," I said more hesitantly. That was the other reason I didn't want to talk to journalists. The benefit concert was to raise money to help me buy prosthetic hands, and I was still uncertain that I wanted them. The only people who knew of my concerns were Katie and Abu, and they had encouraged me to give prosthetic hands another try. Abu had explained that some prosthetic devices are attended to your nerves and can be moved accordingly, meaning if I twitched a muscle as if to pick up a pen the way I would if I had fingers, the prosthetic hand would sense this and pick up the pen. The prosthetics hands I received in England didn't do that. "Please don't tell me they're made of metal," I had moaned. "No," Abu had replied, laughing. "They look just like real hands. He showed me a photograph of them on the internet. And sure enough, they did. But the hands cost nearly $30,000. Katie had asked my tutor whether I might do better at school if I learned to write my examinations along with the other students using prosthetic hands. I was still mostly pulling in C's, and Katie felt I could do better. The tutor, who thought it was worth a try, told the principal how much money was needed, and the principal told the student council. The students had pulled together this event. I was scared that if people knew the truth about my rape or my dislike of prosthetic hands, they would abandon me. I didn't want to let them down, either. Everyone seemed so proud of me. Just a few weeks earlier, I had completed reading Shakespeare Romeo and Juliet for my grade 11 English class. I cried tears of joy when I put the book down. I was finally at the same level as my peers. After I told my drama class about the theater about the theater troupe at the camp, my classmates wanted to know more about our performances. Our drama teacher didn't like us chatting, but behind the curtains I'd whisper to my friends about HIV and AIDS and the part I'd played of a mourning village woman. I wish we could do a play about our lives, one of the boys said. We could do plays about cutting and violent boyfriends and dieting, said one girl. Instead, we have to put on this boring stuff that only adults want to watch, another added. We all started to laugh. Quiet back there, the teacher yelled. Everyone seemed happy and I was part of their lives, but I worried that could change in an instant. None of the journalists in the library that afternoon asked questions about the war or about Abdul. I was relieved at the time, though afterwards I wish I had been able to tell everyone the truth. Before the concert began, I had to go on stage to say a few words. I was really nervous about that too. Hello, everyone, I said into the microphone. There was a standing room only in the audience. Thank you so much for doing this for me. Beside me stood one of the band members from Sum 41. I hadn't done enough public speaking to risk making a joke, but I was thinking of one. Something like, all you girls should come and meet these cute boys after. The girls in the front row already had their eyes glued to the band members' every move. The concert was fun. I didn't feel like dancing, so I stood off to the side and watched. In between playing songs, some of the band members spoke about the impact of war on children and called the world leaders to do more to end the conflicts. I hadn't known until I came to Canada that there are wars all over the world, and that today children are the number one casualty. In many countries, there are children like me maimed by guns and knives. As I was leaving the stage, a teacher I knew came up to me. You should write a book, she said. I'd make sure every one of my students reads it. I mulled over my teacher's comment as we drove home that evening. She wasn't the first one to suggest a book about my life. I couldn't imagine many people would want to read such a book, even if I could figure out how to write it. At least, though, I fell asleep thinking a book could dispel my myths that had built up around me. On a warm April night in 2007, writing my book became a reality. Katie had announced a few days early that a journalist who'd interviewed me after I arrived in Canada wanted to do a follow-up story. Now the journalist, whose name was Susan, sat across from Katie and me, asking questions about how I liked high school. Have you heard of Ishmael Bea? Susan asked near the end of our conversation. No, I replied. Ishmael was a former child soldier in Sierra Leone, Susan said, and he had published a best-selling book about his experiences. Best-selling book? I exclaimed. People in the West want to read about Sierra Leone? Susan nodded. Ishmael was going to be in Toronto the following week, she told me. My story would run beside his in a national newspaper, the Globe and Mail. As she was leaving, Susan turned to me. Mariatu, would you like to meet Ishmael? I gulped. I thought of the boy soldiers who had cut off my hands. I'm not sure, I replied. Can I think about it? Many times, I had thought back to those boy soldiers. Katie and Abu kept me pretty sheltered from Sierra Leone politics, but I had learned through the internet that a special court had been set up in Freetown to investigate some of the soldiers, including the leaders who had ordered rape, murder, and amputation on people's hands. What would I do if I was in that courtroom and had to testify? I asked myself. What would I do if I ever saw one of those boys who had hurt me? At first, I felt only angry. I wanted those 4 boys dead. I hoped the special court would order them killed. But the anger made me feel sick. And over time, I saw that taking a life was not the solution. They were kids, like me, who'd got up in something beyond their control. Maybe in the bush they thought of their parents and sisters and felt alone and scared like I had. There was nothing I could do, I realized, even if I wanted to. Even if those boys were right in front of me, I wouldn't be able to hurt them, not with my words or with my body. They might spend some time in prison, but there was no way I could allow myself to make them suffer. Instead, I imagined those boys standing before me as I said to them, I hope you're very sorry for what you did to me, but I forgive you. Susan called over the weekend to make sure I'd seen her stories in the newspaper. At about 8 o'clock that Sunday night, I was sitting alone in my bedroom. I punched in Susan's telephone number on my cell phone. If I didn't reach her, I vowed I'd take it as a sign not to go through with what I was about to ask. Susan picked up. Hi, it's me, Mariatu, I said. How was your weekend? Good. And yours? Fine. How are the girls? She told me about her 2 young daughters. Good, she replied. I could sense she knew what I was procrastinating. Everything okay, Mariatu? She asked. I want to meet Ishmael. I blurted out the words before I knew what I had done. I think I can arrange that, Susan said. 3 days later, I was standing in front of a big old church in downtown Toronto with Abu, Katie, and Susan. Ishmael's publicist had said we could have a private session with him before his speech and book signing. When I saw Ishmael, I breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't look at all like any of the boys from Manarma. He had a broad face, a high forehead, and curly hair. And I instantly felt I had found a friend, odd as that seemed with a former child soldier. Abu opened the conversation with Ishmael by talking about Sierra Leonean food. I miss those cassava leaves and hot peppers, he joked, as he bit into a coffee shop sandwich. Ishmael asked if I knew about Sierra Leoneans in New York City, where he lived. I did. Some of the kids from the refugee camp had moved there, and we discovered we had some friends in common. Next, we talked about music. He likes rap. I prefer hip-hop. I want to write a book, I said to Ishmael, as his publicist signaled that it was time for his speech to begin. What do you want to call it? He asked. Maybe Never Give Up on Your Dreams. Is that a good title? I think it's an excellent title. He smiled, then moved to give me a goodbye hug. Do you think anyone will want to read a book about me? I asked. Yes, came his reply. Yes.